book is out. Those of you who are here regularly may know about Unmasked 2020, Colorado's Radical Left Turn and a Warning to America. I think it's $14.95 paperback, Amazon or wherever, or $3.99 if you like to just download the ebooks. I'm going to put some flyers for the book over here. It's really, really good. Especially that next one.
No, we're not.
Hey, everybody. Blue.
Quiet, please. Does this work? What am I thinking?
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the October 13th, 2020 Arapahoe Tea Party meeting. Really grateful for everybody who took some time out tonight to listen to this very important presentation. We've got a full room here. I know there are people watching online on Zoom. And without any further ado, we need to talk about this very important upcoming election problem that we anticipate having, because as I said before we went on live here, I expect a very positive result on election night for Donald Trump, and then it's going to be game on. We'll see if our special guest feels differently about that, but I can see no reason not to just simply bring him on. You probably know Steve Bannon well from so many things. He's the former White House chief strategist for the 2016 President Donald J. Trump campaign. He is the host of War Room Pandemic, which, gosh, what is it, 17 or 20 million downloads or more now? The thing is just killer. As many of you know, I'm suing the governor and doing a lot in our state on shutdowns, and I have taken advantage of the great information on War Room Pandemic to try and be at least half a step ahead on all the information pouring in on the Chinese Communist Party Wuhan virus. But Mr. Bannon is here to talk to us tonight about the efforts to steal our election, and it's my honor to welcome him. Good evening, Steve.
Randy, thanks. I also want to thank Regina and Dave Petties for helping out tonight and helping to put this on. I'm really honored to be talking to the Arapahoe Tea Party. As you know, I got my real start in politics with the Tea Party movement back after the financial crash in 2009, 2010. So really honored to be talking to you all tonight.
Thanks.
Look, Randy summed it up. Let me just cut to the chase here, is that given my knowledge, I've been involved in China back starting in 1976, 77 as a naval officer in the 7th Fleet out in the South China Sea and on patrol, East China Sea. So I've had a real involvement. I've owned businesses there. I've been in and out of Hong Kong, Shanghai, lived in Shanghai for a while. When this pandemic hit in mid-January, we were the first media company on it, the first people on it. But we were mocked and ridiculed by a lot of people in the Republican Party, but more importantly by mainstream media. Said this thing's nothing. I said, no, you're wrong. This is a world historical event. And the reason I know that, if the Chinese Communist Party's got to shut down Hubei province, which is the size of France, and quarantine Wuhan, which is the size of New York City, and in addition, shut down their entire country for a month, this is a big deal. I am absolutely convinced that this is man-enhanced and either came from a gain-of-function experiment in the Wuhan lab or is an actual bioweapon. And I think time will tell on that. But one thing I noticed is we try to present, as Randy just talked about, we try to present all sides. We have a lot of libertarians, a lot of conservative Republicans on, and a lot of great doctors that said, hey, we cover everything from this is a hoax, nothing's going on, it ought to be open, we ought to be Sweden and herd immunity, to people think it's a bioweapon and it's got to be shut down, etc. We try to cover all the bases, get the nomenclature, because we think this pandemic requires that kind of coverage. And we talk about the financial crisis, the capital markets crisis, the political crisis. One thing I noticed in the spring was kind of the mainstream media kept saying they were evidence-based, data-based, science-based, but they were really anything but. What they were doing was really mass hysteria. And I noticed they were starting to really lack engagement in the primary process, the Democratic Party. What really struck me was I think it was in June, a Democratic primary in New York City. Basically, Democratic candidates, Democratic election officials, Democratic, everything controlled by Democrats. No Republicans, no conservatives, nothing. And in Brooklyn, it was all by mail. And the reason is they had traumatized their base that nobody wanted to go vote. They all wanted to do it by mail. And what I saw was that in Brooklyn, woke Brooklyn, the woke capital of the world, 30% of the ballots were uncertifiable by Democrats. And in New York City, kind of know-it-all Manhattan, 20%. So this is big. This is a big deal. And that's when they started making all these moves to do all this vote by mail, all this mail-in votes. So we started tracking it. And we noticed it's come up in the last couple of weeks, but we were on this story back in June and July, that 80 million potential mail-in votes. And just to put it in perspective, in 16 when we won, it was 132 million total votes. And in this year, it could be 140 million, 150 million, maybe north of 150 million. Vish, you might see this thing looks like it might be down. So we noticed this is going to be huge and really kind of a game changer, and that they would try to change all the rules. They would try to change all the rules to have this, so they have an election that they can really control the ballots, right? Control what was non-traditional. They came out in basically in July with this thing called the Transition Integrity Project. This was a wargaming exercise made up of never Trumpers, certain members of the Republican establishment that had really turned against President Trump, plus the Berggruen Institute, George Soros, and others. And this was an effort to really talk about using the legal system, to use social media, to use the mainstream media companies, in addition to using Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and street protests, kind of a convergence of forces between lawfare, media, and the streets to really make sure that they essentially stole the real vote, the game day vote, what we call it, from President Trump. So as we sit here about 21 days out, everything's playing exactly according to plan. Here's what's going to happen. When you see all these polls out there, you got to bifurcate these polls. Number one, 69% to 75% of the Democrats say right now they do not want to go stand in line and vote. What they want to do is vote by mail. The reverse of that is 70 to 75% of the President Trump's supporters want to vote on election day. And so we have this huge dichotomy. All the polls you're seeing don't really bifurcate it down to people that are going to vote in person and those that are going to vote by mail. And on the people that are going to vote on election day, President Trump's leading by 21% to 22%. And so here's what the plan is. The plan is right now is that they intend to reverse over the following weeks in counting rooms to count, I think, uncertifiable ballots to reverse the game day victory President Trump's going to have. If you really look at the numbers in the undercard of the battleground states and really see how this thing's playing out, because remember, when I was running the campaign in 16, we were still 10 points down, right? So it's the breakdown of really where these votes are in these battleground states. In 16, I might want to add that we spent an awful lot of time in Colorado, but Colorado got away from us. So here's what's going to happen. I think 10, 11 o'clock at night on election night, President Trump's going to be pretty far ahead, right? And he's going to declare that, hey, he's the winner, because that's the real vote, the vote that counts. What you're going to see after that is they will not declare a winner. They will not declare President Trump's got the victory here, that they intend to, and they talk about this. There's no more election night. You see Facebook saying this, Twitter saying this, MSNBC, if you go in there tonight, they've actually got an ad up calling it election season, that election night's a dangerous term. So you're already seeing how they're trying to socialize this, right? How they're trying to get it in mind that, hey, we just got to keep counting until we go. Now, remember, traditionally, I think it's like 12 or 15 million absentee ballots by mail. Also some early voting. I think it gets up to a total of 22 to 25 million votes that come from some other way than election day. What you're going to see this time is 60 to 80 million mail-in ballots. And of course, across the nation, you're seeing where people are having 5 or 6 ballots sent to the home from people that lived there 20 years ago, et cetera. So this is just rife to be abused. What they intend to do is to start getting the rooms and counting these ballots until they win. In 2000, we didn't have a resolution until right before the night the Electoral College met. And that was a handful of precincts, essentially, in Broward County. It came up to a total of 537 votes. So what you're going to have here is tens of millions. Now, if our election officials can't certify the votes by December 6th and then December 8th, December 8th being the safe harbor of which these slates of electors have to be selected. You blow through that, the Electoral College really doesn't meet in the state capitals on the 14th. That means it gets kicked into the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, each state gets 1 vote by state. We've had this happen in 1800, and we had it happen again in 1876. And this is where I think we're heading right now, that the presidential election will actually be determined in the House of Representatives. As I see it today, with President Trump winning the game day vote, and then the progressive left fighting in these ballot counting rooms for every ballot, I think you're going to end up with these things being not certifiable, and we'll blow through the safe harbor, blow through the Electoral College, kick it right into the House. And the House gets to be very complicated. Remember, it has to be the new Congress that's seated from the November 3rd or from the November 3rd election. Right now, it breaks down by congressional delegation. You have 26 Republican delegations or states. You have 23 Democrat, and you have 1 that's tied. That's the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now, 4 or 5 of these are in play right now. I actually believe that if the Republicans continue to do their work, I think this could be 26, 21, and like 4 or 5. So there's or 3. So there's a lot. I think there's a couple of these state delegations that actually could go into the neutral, right? And I think that this is the way that President Trump actually may end up winning. But this is all going to be intensely fought. Now, what's going to happen is that they're already planning for this. They already have the mainstream media that's not going to declare a winner. They've already got their ground forces lined up. They've already got their law firm. After we broke this story and started talking about it back in July and having experts on, the New York Times had a huge story about, the war room they have. They have a war room just for legal. They have 800 attorneys. They have Perkins Coie Law Firm, which is one of the top election law firms in the country. They have Mark Elias is the senior partner there. He's the guy that stole the election from Senator Coleman with Al Franken when they kept finding baskets of ballots and trunks, and that's how they beat him. I think they beat him by 500 votes. So you've got professionals. Eric Holder runs that overall organization. You've got 3 former solicitor generals. You got a couple of U.S. attorneys. It's a very impressive group. Now, President Trump and the Trump campaign have the Lawyers for Trump. I think they have 1,500 lawyers right now. We've been able to, I think the campaign's done an amazing job with outside groups like your own. I think right now there's 50,000 poll watchers that they want to line up. I think they're very close to reaching that. Also election officials, which is absolutely critical. Everybody in the room to sign up to be an election official. That puts you in the room to actually do the ballot count, which is going to be essential here. So long story short, don't think November 3rd is going to be the day that you can pop the champagne and rest on your laurels. This, I think, right now, as I see it, and look, it could break for President Trump even greater. Maybe we put this away totally on Tuesday, the 3rd of November. But as I see it right now, this is going to be very hard fought, and President Trump will be the leader. I believe President Trump will declare himself the winner. That'll trigger the mainstream media, and then you're going to have an intense fight. And I think that intense fight is going to go all the way up to the night before the inauguration on the 20th of January of 2021. So what we're doing is going around. I've been given a national tour to talk to as many groups as possible. We've had tremendous response, and that's basically say, hey, look, you got to break this down into elements. Right now, the most important thing you can be is a force multiplier, to just be tweeting out all kind of information you get on this, whether it's war room pandemic or, Byron York's got a great article on this. Michael Anton's got a great article called The Coup. There's tons of great information coming out right now. Push all that out as a force multiplier to make sure everybody in your circle, everybody in your network is totally up to speed. The second thing is obviously the most important thing, I think, is get out the vote. And what I mean by that is phone banks. This is going to come down to low, not just low information, but people that don't vote that often, right? The low priority voters. And so this is what people have to focus on. That's going to be the key. It's the key for the Democrat side. A lot of times when you see these huge numbers that you're seeing every day in the paper, remember, I still think the analysis shows they're cannibalizing their game day vote. I have not seen hard facts, and we're starting to get them in. My opinion may change by this weekend. I'm not seeing a hard facts that they're actually getting those low priority voters so far. So right now, I think they're cannibalizing their game day vote with this mail, and we'll know in the early votes as it really kicks up over the next couple of days. But it's essential for us to get out the vote, because those voters are the key voters we got to get to, right? So, and that's, to me, that is just knocking on doors. It's doing phone banks, is all that. In addition, we need volunteers for be poll watchers, so to make sure there's no nonsense that happens on election day. This is particularly relevant in some of the big blue states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, where people are already, having volunteers sign up. Those are going to be real fights. Also in Florida, but particularly Pennsylvania and Michigan. In addition, it's to volunteer to be an election official. Election official actually puts you in the room, and that's going to be incredibly important. A lot of those are going to be lawyers, but they're also just looking for dedicated, tough people also. This thing's very winnable. In fact, I think we should win it if we thread the needle and stay maniacally focused, because I think President Trump's done such a great job. I think there's also some information that'll be coming out about Biden in the next couple of days that I think will start to upset the apple cart and put him back on the defensive. I think President Trump will go on offense for the closing 3 weeks, just like we did in 2016. So this is all out in front of us. It's 100%, I think, on the shoulders of Tea Party groups, the deplorables, the people that make up the Trump base, because I think those are the people that are going to, at the end of the day, make sure that they turn out every possible vote. Just to go back to 2016, remember when I stepped in mid-August, I think we were down 10, 12, 14 points, whatever poll you were looking at. We closed that gap down to, we were actually, in the 6 weeks after I took over, we closed that gap to, we were actually up one on September 27th, which was the morning of the first debate in Hofstra. Right between then and Billy Bush weekend, we hit a couple of air pockets. We got down as much, I think, as 8, 10, 12, maybe some 14 in some polls after Billy Bush weekend. But President Trump was able to focus and close, and he's the best closer in the world. And I think it's that, I think we're in the same situation now. We did, and I always say this, in 2016, we drew an inside straight, but it was an inside straight that was based on the skill of where to focus and where absolutely to go. We won by 72,000 votes. I think 42,000 votes in Pennsylvania, 20 in Michigan, and 12 in Wisconsin. But it was because of the focus. Right now, you're seeing this kind of focus. The campaign's got a great team. Bill Stepien ran our ground game nationwide in 2016. He's an incredible piece of manpower. Jason Miller, Steve Cortez, Greg Manns, others that they have over there are absolutely super. So you've got the right team. They're clicking on all cylinders. And so right now, what they need is the force multiplier of groups like yourself. So we can win this, and we have to win it. Look, this is not coming from me. There was a letter sent by 250 revered flag officers a couple of weeks ago. And these are guys that fought in every major war we've had over the last 40 or 50 years, including when I came off sea duty, I went back as an aide to the Chief of Naval Operation, Tom Hayward, who's an old fighter pilot. He signed this letter also. And what these flag officers said, both admirals and generals, has said, hey, this is not just the most important election in our lifetime. They believe, and this was in the opening couple of sentences, they believe this is the most important election in the history of the Republic. Because if we lose this, you've seen what the alternatives are. And I don't need to tell people in Colorado, you saw essentially a conservative Trump supporter assassinated. That's what he was killed in cold blood. I think it was a political assassination, on the streets of Denver. So you see what the stakes are. You see the other side is not prepared to back off. Hillary Clinton's already on the record of saying under no circumstances should Joe Biden concede. There was an article done by Jeffrey Toobin in the New Yorker about 2 weeks ago talking about this exact topic. And in that article, they quoted a senior Democratic Party official who said the Democratic Party today is radically different than 2000 in that they're not that institutionally oriented. They're more ideologically oriented and aligned. And they said, you will not find, there's zero chance that any senior official will say in the process here after November 3rd that for the good of the country, their candidate should concede and they'll just get it in 2024. Basically what Al Gore did back in 2000. And the reason the individual said this, they said, look, they don't think the country's sustainable under Donald Trump for another 4 years. And they think he's an existential threat to the Democratic Party. They think he's particularly an existential threat to the United States. This is the type of rhetoric. This is the type of mindset. These people are playing for keeps. They are unscrupulous. They will use any means necessary to win. They have no intention of conceding. And so this is why it's absolutely everybody's got to put their shoulder to the wheel here. So I really want to thank you guys for taking time tonight to hear my pitch. And I would love to take questions if anybody's got them.
Thank you very much, Steve. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Hear you now. I can see you now too.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. This is why I wanted Joe Biden to actually, I told her I didn't mind for the president to have a virtual debate because Joe Biden wanders around the stage when he has an audience. If you have to talk into one of these things, it's quite disorienting. Joe Biden, who can't put 3 sentences together, I think would have had an epic fail, but we're not going to get a chance to see that.
I just want you to know there are people in this room who were at that Patriot muster and were standing by when the Patriot was shot on Saturday. And we're going after the local news media that hired that so-called security guard that executed Lee Keltner.
Look, we've already done a war room. We're going to do it again tomorrow, but we've gone and looked at the board of directors. I think it's called Tegna is the parent company. This is private equity. This is the deplorables money. It's your pension funds. It's your insurance companies. If you look at the board of directors, they're on every left wing. They're associated with every left wing group, media group in the world. This is NBC. It's got other senior executives from NBC on this. This is unacceptable. That was a political assassination. They shot that Patriot in cold blood like a dog. Okay. It's unacceptable. And you see it, you're between Portland and Seattle and Denver. We see how these people are. We see what they're prepared to do, and it's just not acceptable. Franklin said on the steps of Constitution Hall after signing of the Declaration, that famous statement when this woman asked him, do we have a republic? And he said, a republic if you can keep it. It's on our shoulders, our generation. We've had, 14 generations before us, 15 generations. We've been bequeathed the greatest nation in the history of the earth, okay? And we see what the enemies of this republic are. It couldn't be clearer. And what happened in Denver the other day to that Patriot shows you exactly what they're prepared to do, what they think of us, right? And how they don't want to take any responsibility. You haven't seen any apologies or anything from Pinkerton. You haven't seen apologies from NBC. You haven't seen apologies from anybody on the board of directors. I hope that family sues not just the companies. I hope they sue the directors individually, personally, for going after this. These people are cold-blooded. And this is what's going to happen starting the night. You're already seeing it. But this is what's going to happen. They accuse the right of being violent. There's no heated rhetoric coming out of here. We did all this. Our analysis was all done off of stuff they were doing at the Transition Integrity Project and other places, right? They're the ones that are saying they're not going to concede. They're the ones saying Trump's an existential threat. They're the ones who are saying that election night is a dangerous concept. Their rhetoric is always heated and it's getting raised. And they have to be stopped now. We can't think about 2024. There's no tomorrow after November 3rd. We have to win. And what we have to do is not allow them to reverse the will of the American people. So I can't, people came to me back in June to get on the campaign, right? And I'd done this in 16. I said, no. I don't need to be on the campaign. You've got Stepien, you've got great people, and the campaign knows what it has to do to kind of provide the platform for President Trump because now he's the incumbent. There's other things out there that can't be done on a campaign I've got to do, and this is it. We cannot allow this thing to be stolen. If we allow this to be stolen, we are a banana republic. You guys out there have seen this group up close and personal. You see what they're prepared to do. So, you know, we're not violent people and we're not going to get violent, but I got to tell you, we're not going to be pushed around either, right? There is zero probability that we're going to allow this to be stolen when Donald J. Trump wins.
Well, I'll just tell you, at the Patriot muster on Saturday, there were plenty of people ready to sacrifice their honor, their treasure. What happened to the Patriot was after the muster. We were as safe and as well protected as we could be inside. And those types of groups are popping up all over Colorado. I hope and pray that it's happening all around the country. We've got a question from the Zoom chat. And of course, Steve, when you're ready to go, just give us a heads up. We'll give you maybe one last question.
One thing I want to say, I gotta talk to you guys. I'm loving being in Arapahoe with the Tea Party. I got to tell you guys, Zoom is total CCP, but that's a talk for another day. So
there was some talk about that before we set this up, but anyway. Well, you know what? There's nothing off the record for the Chinese in this conversation. We're ready for those bastards too.
Amen, brother. Amen.
The chat question or the Zoom chat question is, should we be prepared for violence at the polling places, especially since Republicans are more inclined to, wait till near election day and hand carry and deliver and vote in person?
I think one of the things they're going to try to do, look, always be prepared for violence. But look, we are, since there's so many veterans and so many, people that have sacrificed for their country that are part of the Trump movement and part of the Republican Party. Remember, we always got to be at a higher level because they're going to try to nitpick everything you do. You're a racist, you're a nativist, you're a xenophobe, you're all violent. You all want to do this. I think you got to be careful, right, around these polling places. And the polling, there's the Trump program. The Trump campaign has a great training program. The RNC has a great training program. I think if you're going to be a poll watcher, go by the books, check in, do everything you got to do, make sure you're official, and that's what you should do. Here's what I think is actually going to happen. I think it's going to be not violence. I think what they're going to do is, particularly in these big blue states, and I'm going to throw out some random names like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin that are run by Democratic governors. I think you're going to see them start to try to take down polling places, saying it's the COVID virus, right? We can't get workers there, or it's dangerous. We want to have fewer things. They're trying to stretch out the line. I think they're going to try to make it as difficult as possible to actually physically vote on November 3rd. Look, if you look at 10 million people have already voted, if you start to look, and I think they are cannibalizing, at least as we see it right now, their game day vote. But one of the things with the conservative movement, with the Republican Party, with the Trump movement, we do put a tremendous burden on getting out to vote on game day, on election day, because we're usually trailing behind, right? The absentee vote or the early vote. So they're going to try to play every game of the world. These people have no compunction, right? They have no compunction of what I would say. We're not violent people, but be aware, be cautious, and make sure that you're playing by the rules. And, I don't put anything beyond them, but just be prepared and be forewarned.
I haven't seen this yet. Another question from the chat. Have you seen the Project Veritas video that was released tonight with, what are they called again? The Our Revolution chairman from Weld County, Colorado?
Yeah, I haven't seen that. We have a very good relationship with the Veritas guys. I think that we're having them on the show. We were the first guys to have, after they put it up on Drudge, we were the first ones that interviewed them the next morning with the fiasco in Minnesota. You saw in Minneapolis where you had the Omar's people, basically buying the people, some of the Somalia people there buying and selling of votes and ballots, et cetera, which was terrible. I didn't think it got to play. It should have. I think the team at Project Veritas did a great job. I haven't seen it, but I know we're going to have Project Veritas actually on the show in the next couple of days. So I'm sure we'll see it. They've
I've
done,
been-
by the way, they've done a fabulous job of getting inside and doing deep investigations in this whole area.
I've been saying on my radio show, and maybe you'll temper this enthusiasm from me, that because of this third US Supreme Court nomination, the fact that we'll have a true 5-4 conservative majority before the election or very soon after, that that litigation regarding ballots could really turn out favorably for Donald Trump, and maybe it doesn't get all the way to this congressional count. Is that too much optimism from where you stand?
Well, let's step back for a second. Remember, the progressive left always does this to themselves, and they always want to whine and complain. Number one, let's just go back to the Supreme Court very quickly. You know, the reason Merrick Garland was not approved was really the progressive Democrats. They didn't really force the issue. They didn't make a huge deal about it. The reason is they knew Hillary Clinton was going to win. They wanted a more progressive judge than Merrick Garland. They thought he was way too moderate. They thought he was center left. They wanted a Lawrence Tribe. They wanted somebody really progressive, and they didn't make a big deal about it because they knew they were so arrogant and cocky that that Hillary Clinton was going to win. This is also Justice Ginsburg. I have tremendous respect for her. Right, I don't agree with her political philosophy or her legal opinions, but as an individual, I had a lot of respect. She was tough as boot leather, and I really admire that. But remember, she made a conscious decision. She didn't go under Obama's thing because they knew Hillary. They wanted Hillary to have as many picks as possible. They brought that on themselves. Okay, now let's cut to this current situation. The reason you need Judge Barrett, and we can't wait till after the election. I'd say I've seen enough nonsense of what's going on in this committee. I'd wrap it up. Let them have another day and get this thing to a vote, a debate, and a vote this weekend. People shouldn't be going home. They should be working. And they should get this to a vote and get her. And here's the reason. When I go back to the lawfare part of this, there are already 200 lawsuits. You can go on Politico or The Hill, all the sites all day long. There's already in courts. They're changing the rules as we go, right? Whether it's a number of drop boxes in counties in Texas, how many days afterwards does something have to be postmarked in Pennsylvania, to how long the count's going to be in Michigan. I think Michigan's a 7 or 8 days. They're in court right now with these democratically controlled state courts. They're changing the rules. If you look at the buried lead in these stories, I think there's something like 10% of these cases are already going to go to the Supreme Court. We need Judge Barrett approved now, not after the election, now. There's no excuse. Have you seen this nonsense that's gone on the last couple of days? That a woman who I think is close to a living saint as you can get, besides being brilliant, to have the Democrats try to disparage her, it's enough. Let them have another day and then call the vote. Let them come up and spend a couple of days on the floor and work this weekend. I don't want to hear it's next week. She needs to get on that court. She needs to get on that court now. And part of this is because they're the ones driving it. They're the ones that have the big war room with lawyers. They're the ones that got Eric Holder and Perkins Coie. They're the ones in all these state courts. They always bring it on themselves. Why are we even here with this whole thing of mail-in ballot? They've totally destroyed the voting process here. Why? Because they created mass hysteria, right? And traumatized not just their base, also the elites. They're totally traumatized. I'm here in Midtown Manhattan, right? In New York City. It's a ghost town. It's a ghost town. When you see people walk around, they got fear in their eyes. That's because of CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post. They have put fear in people. Look, we have covered this thing from the very beginning. We know we have forgotten more than most of these organizations know, and we understand there's a way you can present this. We think it's very serious, but you can work through this. You can open up the country, right? You can play college football. You can do that. You got to do it. You got to know how to mitigate risk, right? Which I think Trump's done a pretty good job of. But you just can't go down into a hole. That's what they want, okay? It is once again on them, and they make their problems everybody else's problems, right? So no, you're absolutely 1,000% correct on your show. And this is why, and I happen to think with all this is going on, this is one of the reasons I think this is even going to go to the Supreme Court, but I don't see how I just don't know physically how you're going to certify all these with all the fights that are going to go on about the individual ballots to get past the safe harbor. So that's why I think as I see it right now, look, it could change. This thing is very dynamic. That's one of the things I want to leave you tonight about the race. This is incredibly fluid and incredibly dynamic. And don't let any of these suppression polls take away your enthusiasm. We have within our ability to win this, just like in 16. Remember, when I first took over the campaign, it was like 12 or 14 down. I told the president, the candidate that night, 100% metaphysical certitude, you will win if we just stick to this plan. The president, the candidate stuck to it and we won. I say the same thing now. We have a 100% metaphysical certitude to win if we stick with a plan. And part of this plan, a big part of this plan, is making sure we're prepared. If we don't win in a sweeping landslide on November 3rd, and let's say right now the polling looks like that's not going to be the case, that we have to be prepared to defend the victory we have. And that's going to come from, quite frankly, it's going to come on your shoulders.
Can we take a couple questions from inside the room here? You got some time still?
Sure, for you guys, anything.
Thanks, Steve. Who's first? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you hear me if I yell?
I can hear you fine. You don't have to yell. I hear you.
Steve, it's Catherine from Women for Trump. We all know you've got a little bit of a cloud hanging over your head. We just want to send you our best wishes to you as well and want to know how you're doing.
No, okay, so listen, the Southern District, look, there are no conspiracies. I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. I never have been. But there are no coincidences, right? 4 years almost to the date I took the campaign over, the Southern District of New York dropped a bullshit indictment, right? I had $1 million contract, my C4 $1 million contract to help build the wall down there. And anybody's been to El Paso, anybody's been to Rio Grande Valley, we did an amazing job. That little group did an amazing job to build wall. And we put on all the conferences, we went around all over the country and put on town halls, all of that. I'm absolutely bulletproof on this. And you'll see over the next, I think the next 12 hours, you'll see another project I've been working on that the Southern District wasn't particularly happy with. But no, this is a bullshit indictment. But here's the good news. It's only made our show bigger. It's made my platform bigger. I've got more access to resources. So this is law of unintended consequences. There's no group of left-wing lawyers on earth that's going to shut me up, right? I've dedicated my life to this. I've dedicated my life to this populist movement. I've dedicated my life to this nationalist movement. I've dedicated my life to help the Chinese people free themselves from the Chinese Communist Party and therein free the world. You know, I served as a naval officer for 8 years. My daughter's a West Point grad to serve in the 101st Airborne. It takes a lot more than a bunch of pencil necks at the Southern District of New York to back me off. And I got to tell you, they haven't backed me off one iota. So thank you for asking.
There are people in the room not familiar or not that familiar with War Room Pandemic. Will you explain how you're getting that message into communist China?
Yeah, here's what it is, that our show is picked up. Basically, we're on Newsmax TV. We're on Real America Voice, which is out of Colorado, the old AVN, America's Voice.News, fabulous company. They're the streaming company. They're also now Dish 219, and they're on Comcast also. So we're on cable. We're on a massive radio network, the John Frederick Radio Network, which is really the deplorables back east and in the South. And also because we cover so much of CCP and we have such knowledge of it, the Chinese Communist Party, is that we have G News and GTV basically in real time and then subtitled, do in Mandarin and blow it through the firewall. So the show gets 50 million viewers a day globally. And we're in Australia, New Zealand, wherever the diaspora of the Chinese Communist Party, of people that have left China and trying to bring freedom. So it's really, I have a great time doing this. We're on pandemic, but we do a lot of political news, a lot of economic news, a lot of financial news, given my Wall Street background. So I'd love you guys to go to the site or go catch the show. We also have a podcast. We do live and we've got a massive audience there, but the podcast has got, I think right now, 16 or 17 million downloads on the podcast, which is the audio version of it. So it's clicking pretty well. And it's something I've really dedicated myself to.
Well, and another thing that keeps my optimism so high is, I was a reluctant Trump voter in 2016 because I just didn't know who he was. I didn't trust that he would necessarily be or do the kind of person that he was going to be. But of course, never Hillary. And then from the moment of the inauguration speech to the first time he went to the UN and faced people down, people like me are on fire for this guy. And now we believe you because you were telling us all this back in 2016, and I just don't know how that enthusiasm doesn't explode nationwide when you see Joe Biden showing up in a battleground state, Arizona, and nobody shows up for his campaign event.
Look, here's why Donald Trump's president of the United States for one reason. The managed decline of our country by our elites. That's why I told him that night when I said 100% metaphysical certainty. Pat Caddell, you may remember from Fox News, he passed away a couple of years ago, but he had been doing research for the first time in American history. 70% of the American people, particularly blue collar and lower middle class, believed the country was in decline and that our elites didn't care. And what they were looking for was a leader to show up that would commit to return America to a former greatness. Look, I was eyeballing Trump back in 2013 at CPAC, but I told Dave Bossie on the 1st of May of 2014, when I saw Trump up in Nashua, New Hampshire, speak at a cattle call to a Tea Party, to the Tea Party groups of New Hampshire. It was all Tea Party. They came up, you had Mike Lee, you had Newt Gingrich, you had Rand Paul, you had Ted Cruz, you had like 10 candidates or potential candidates, 10 or 12. And Trump got up there totally with no notes and gave a speech. And I told Bossie right then, I said, that guy's going to win the primary and that guy's going to be president of the United States. Remember, when I took the campaign over in 2016, or stepped in, I didn't take it over, stepped in as the CEO to work with the candidate. And we had a great team. I didn't know Trump that well. You know, I'd run Breitbart and I'd interviewed him a couple of times, had him on the radio show, had introduced him at a couple of Tea Party events. I didn't really know Trump. You know, he's not a buddy of mine. He's not a friend of mine, but here's what he is. He's an instrument. And I think divine providence has something to do with this, right? He's an instrument, and he's an instrument to stop the decline of this country, right? Is he perfect? No, he's not perfect. Are the tweets perfect? No, they're not. He's got a house style that turns a lot of people off. And you know what? It doesn't matter. The issues we're talking about is absolutely central to keeping us as a republic. Franklin's warning is very true. Reagan's warning, which I know a lot of us laughed off before, that freedom's only one generation. Well, now we're seeing it. If we lose this election, as imperfect as Donald J. Trump is, this country is going to be something very different. So this guy sacrificed everything. He didn't, at his age, with his wealth, with the love of his family, he did not need to do this, right? And listen, remember, they're not trying to beat Donald Trump. They're trying to destroy Donald Trump. They have to destroy Donald Trump. Why is that? Because Donald Trump gives you a voice. It's not just Trump. They're trying to destroy your ability to have a voice in how this country's run. Not in the room, not in the deal. And Donald J. Trump put you in the room and gave you a voice. And so one of the things I'm really proud about is a lot of people that were very skeptical about Trump, like yourself, have seen, right? And they don't love everything, but they see the direction he's turned the country in, and he's seen on the things that matter, right? The things that matter of what he's accomplished. And I got to tell you, I think he's done an incredible job. And I think what he saved this country from Hillary Clinton's elites. And all this is with Biden is just a restoration of that. It's no difference. The policies are still these kind of neocon, neoliberal, globalist policies. The jobs get shipped to China, right? You're going to be working for marginal wages. You're not going to have any ability to kind of save anything. Trump represents working class and middle class people. He's a guy that knows what he's doing. He's had tremendous leadership on foreign policy and national security. The job he's done, whether it's in the Persian Gulf, with Israel, with Iran, but particularly with China, confronting the Chinese Communist Party, I just think it's what he's done is amazing. And I think that when you look at the alternative, and particularly the radical nature of the alternative and what they're prepared to do to win and how they're going to run this country, to me, it's not even close. This is close to black and white choices you could possibly have.
Well, I got to say, I do practically love everything at this point. It's even the Twitter. Laurel, I'm sorry.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a quick question. What do you consider the electoral number that would be considered a landslide to stop all this other rubbish? I'm predicting 390. What is there a number in your head?
That's, by the way,
390. I could come over and hug you. Look, my number's 270. Look, let me just give an example of Transition Integrity Project. They actually ran 4 scenarios in the project itself. One, Biden won by a landslide, so Biden was the winner. The other 3, Biden barely won. It was too close to call, like in 2000, and then Trump barely won. In those three scenarios, the way they count the ballots, they by 2 weeks later, they won all three. They realized they made a mistake. They had to look at what the reality was. And so they retained Hawkfish, which is Bloomberg's data company, and they're very good. They came on Axios HBO, I think 3 Sundays ago, and laid out the fifth scenario. And the fifth scenario was Trump was up at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night on the November 3rd, 424 electoral votes, I think, to 111 or 101, 424. In that scenario, on the 2 days before Thanksgiving, Joe Biden was president-elect. He had 280 electoral votes, the way they worked the math of how they're going to count. So I don't want to call what I think it's going to be. I don't think realistically it's going to be 390, but look, I don't know. I was very focused on taking down the blue wall last time. In fact, I thought we might be spending a little too much time in Colorado, Nevada, and my home state of Virginia. And we got to be focused more on Wisconsin and Michigan, which turned out. President Trump, at the time, candidate Trump was all over me to spend more time in Minnesota. And I said, we don't have time to do that or money. We got to focus on these. And we lost, I think, just by 1 point. And so he was always on me. He says, hey, we could have won Minnesota. We've gone there a couple more times. But look, here's the thing. Let's get 270. What we need is a victory. I'll take anything over, right, to help the mandate. But, President Trump, right now, he feels he has a mandate. He feels he has a mandate from the American people. Let's get to 270. If we get to 390, all the more power to it. Because if we get to 390, that means we're going to pick up a couple of Senate seats, and we're going to start to reverse what's happened in the House, the dirty 30, right? The 30 districts that we won in 16, but was reversed in 18. So if we get to 390 on your math, I love it. We become in more powerful. So let's pray that happens, but let's work to make sure that we get to 270, right? And if we do that, this country is going to be in a good place, because I think President Trump, he's already on fire. And I think since he's come through, he's had the CCP virus. I think he's much more focused now. And I think the second term is going to be amazing.
That's not just steroids, huh? A couple more things. First, I want you to know that this is the largest Tea Party group in Colorado. We have about 1,200 members on Facebook. We're 60, 80. We're in a smaller room now because of COVID, but they elected me in Colorado to be the Republican National Committee man. So we now have the Tea Party infiltrating the swamp. And the people that I've been meeting through the RNC are very Trumpian. I mean, I really believe that the establishment Republican Party is on its way out pretty quick, thanks to Donald Trump. I just got a text from Jefferson Thomas, who's Colorado for Trump campaign leader here. And James O'Keefe just tweeted out, was 9 News security guard and Denver shooter Matt Doloff a member of Colorado's Our Revolution? So apparently that's the tie-in to this Our Revolution thing that he's exposed. And I just believe the October surprises are going to keep coming like crazy. Let me see if we have a last question or two.
Let me say one thing if I take the question. You said about President Trump changing the Republican Party. Remember, it's the Tea Party movement. There wouldn't be a Donald J. Trump, a President Trump, if it had not been for the Tea Party movement. This is how I got involved. I was totally apolitical up until the Tea Party, until the financial crash, and I saw what was happening to working class people. I come from a blue collar family, predominantly Democratic working class union family. And I saw what happened in the crash, and I got involved in the Tea Party movement with Andrew Breitbart very early on. And you guys are the backbone of the country. I mean, really, this election and this is going to come on your shoulders. The great news is the deplorables are the most dependable, decent, hardworking people on earth. And if I got to be on the side of the football of anybody, I want to be on the side of the football of the Tea Party groups and the deplorables. So it's upon your shoulders. This is why President Trump, he depends upon his base. You guys are the ones that make it happen. So the Republican Party, which I agree, I think Ron and these people are doing an amazing job. I think they've been so helpful in this campaign. And I think one of the reasons is that you're starting to see a new Republican Party come about because of President Trump. But that's because of President Trump's followers and President Trump's base.
Jenny Beth Martin is in the White House constantly. We signed some of those 1,100,000 postcards that she just shipped this last week back into those battleground states. So when people think the Tea Party's gone away or not effective. They're just blind to what's really going on. And I think that bodes well for the president as well. This lady has a question.
Yeah, we all have a cell phone. Keep it charged up, record everything on voting day. Record everything you see around Taj Mahal, around use. You may think you're the only one. That's the enemy talking. You're the only one. One means many.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, take your cell phone. If it doesn't look like, record it. But just, if we have it all together, we may see a pattern. It's just like watching the riots in Denver. They had the guys hiring the people, putting them in front, but they were behind pushing it. So
Yeah.
maybe nothing, but
No, that's exactly what that network effect. That's a brilliant comment. Just remember, they're going to try to get our people to do things. Just be calm, just be centered, just be focused. The working class and Tea Party and the base of Trump's base always takes the long view here. We know what the stakes are. So no, I think the thing with the phone is absolutely brilliant.
The first woman that asked you a question from the room here is Laurel Eimer. She was like the Trumpiest Trumper ever from Colorado. She's now running for our state house. And she used to just slap the hell out of me when I was the Ted Cruz delegate and trying to get me on board. She and her son, who's not as young as he used to be, have been to every Trump rally.
Wow.
Except for the RNC convention when COVID shut it all down. But her son, also her campaign manager, Weston Eimer, is here with a question for you, Steve.
Sure.
Howdy, sir. So my question to you is, obviously we were talking about this patriot that was killed in Denver on Saturday. I unfortunately was an eyewitness to that. We are working currently with Michelle Malkin and Randy to plan some type of protest in his memory at 9 News because of the wrongful killing. Is something that you would be willing to help us promote and join?
1,000%. Anything. First off, let me say something. Colorado is a state I absolutely love. Anything you guys need assistance to take Colorado back. It breaks my heart to see some of the progressive, craziness that's happened in Colorado, being such a great state and such a state that's been so important to American history. So anything I can do, people know, you got Vish, my whole team, I'm available. People realize I work 18, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week on this stuff. So anything I can do overall for you guys, and particularly Tea Party, that's the closest thing to my heart, and Jenny Beth Martin, the great team. But particularly this, our show, we're the first guys really go through the board of directors. So yes, we will promote anything. We'll help you guys. You just let us know what you need to do. If you've got some lawyers working on it, I'll talk to them. One of the things I think ought to happen, I think there ought to be lawsuits against the station. I think there ought to be lawsuits against the company that owns the station. I think it ought to be personal lawsuits, not just corporate. There ought to be personal lawsuits against the senior management and the board of directors. That's all these people understand. The only thing they understand is smash mouth, okay? And they're used to doing it to the people that can't defend themselves. When now's the time people can defend themselves. And one of the ways we got to do is turn back and use the law, use the courts, turn it on them. And the one thing these guys fear is exposure. Right. The one thing they fear is exposure. They want to do all their stuff and go to all their clubs and do all this and do it behind. No, you've got the opposite. Look, it is not acceptable that an individual that served in the Navy and served his country and was out there peacefully is shot down, gunned down like a dog. Right. What kind of country we're going to become? We're going to let that go? That's not the United States of America. Right. We got to stand up for this guy. We got to stand up for who he was. We got to stand up for what he represents. So we got to take it to them. And by the way, it should be peaceful, but it should be smash mouth. These people have to understand there's going to be a penalty to be paid. You're not prepared to just sit there like sheep and be gunned down. And so, no, anything I can possibly do to help you all, I'm available 24/7.
You mentioned helping us out here in Colorado. We want to see the president. We want him back here. We know that he's not investing as much time in here, but we want him back in Colorado. So anything you can do, and thank you for your help.
Let me be brutally frank. I love you guys, but right now we got like 20 days.
Yeah.
Colorado gets us to the 390. We got to get to the 270. I wouldn't. Look, the president loves Colorado. I mean, last time I was a little bit trying to talk him out of it because I said, hey, I don't know if we're getting the traction we need here, particularly with the mail. You guys do the mail-in ballots. The president was absolutely adamant. If you remember that last weekend, I think we started in Vegas or started in Colorado at the rodeo, right? So the president loves Colorado. It upset him no end that he didn't win last time. He's not believing he's not going to win it this time. But I think just given the press of events we've got, particularly how difficult it is to actually campaign with the CCP virus around, I don't hold it against him. He loves Colorado. What I would do is get him to try to do some digital things out there to get you guys like this. I think you get thousands of people out there and get them jacked up and hear the program of President Trump. I think it would go a long way.
Well, we'll definitely follow up with you on that because, and surrogates are great too, because we understand the president's got to hit those battleground states over and over. Boy, you've been so generous with your time tonight, Steve. The information has been phenomenal. What can we do as far as sharing this? I know it's being recorded tonight.
Just what you should do is just push it out. Just push it on your Twitter, your Facebook, whatever you can. If you go to the show, I think you'll see that, we're followed by basically all the important. Here's what I try to do is try to do it at Breitbart. Because I come from a blue collar family. My grandfather went to third grade in high school, grade school. My mom wasn't even a high school grad. My dad just graduated from high school, but they were very well read and very educated. I always try to make sure that everything I do, particularly in media, has got, like I'm talking to somebody at Goldman Sachs or Harvard Business School or the United States Navy. We always try to raise the bar. Every major trading desk in the world listens to the show. All the political opposition you can see by their broadcasting. Media Matters is on us all the time. And the reason is we come at this in a very sophisticated way, but very accessible. So if you go to the show, it'll be well worth your time. I hate wasting people's time, right? I think it's the most valuable thing you have. So you go to the show, but then not just us, all this right now, two things you should be doing is pushing out all of this knowledge and all this information to your friends, get people talking about it, get people engaged, get people pumped up. Then the second thing is obviously get out the votes, incredibly important. And then obviously poll watching, and particularly people like you are at the vanguard of this revolution. You have got to be election officials. So to the degree that you can go back to the RNC and volunteer, or to your local, counties or whatever, how you're ever structured in Colorado, get in the room. If you're in the room, you're going to be in the room when the count goes on, and that's going to be absolutely essential.
It's brilliant. Thanks. I know it's a late night where you're at. Boy, Godspeed, God bless, and keep it up, man. You energize us and you do it well. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.